Hello, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about father complex, aka daddy issues. We are diving into this topic with Jamila Bonvenya. I hope I pronounced that right.
Perfect.
um, she is a father complex coach specializing in empowering women between the ages of 25 and 35 to move through the challenges associated with father complex, also known as daddy issues. With her compassionate approach and deep understanding, Jamila helps her clients unravel the complexities of their relationships with their fathers and reclaim their sense of self-worth and autonomy. I am really, really interested in this topic. I have not had anybody touch on this topic. So I'm really excited to jump into this episode with you. But first of all, I just want to welcome you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to share more around father complex because, like you said, not a lot of people have heard that term and it is usually known as daddy issues. So really excited and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we do dive into this interesting topic, I always start with my rapid inspiration questions. So, yeah, these are a little bit. These are often the hardest questions for our guests because our guests are always professionals and like really good at what they do. So the podcast interview is super easy, and then we get to these rapid inspiration questions. And they're like, ooh.
Everyone gets sweaty palms.
Totally. The first one is, what is the most unconventional thing that you have on your bucket list that you haven't yet done?
Oh my goodness. As in something that I want to do that I haven't. Okay. Yeah. I have this thing, like I don't want to do it, but I do want to do it because it's such a fear of mine, is just to jump out of a plane. It's always been this thing like, I won't do it, I will do it. But because it's such a fear for me, I want to do it. So it's definitely on my bucket list. When that will happen, I'm not sure, but it's definitely something that is on my mind. I don't know why, like all the time. I think especially when I get faced with a lot of stress in my life, or I want to be able to, how can I push myself to be better when I am in situations where it's really hard? And I'm like jumping out of a plane, like doing my biggest fear. So yeah, that's probably on my bucket list, but still very umming and ahhing about it.
Well, when it happens, let us know, please.
Yeah, I'll film it for you.
Excellent. And what is your favorite food and why?
My favorite food. Oh, that's a hard one because I feel like I go through different phases in my cycle, to be honest. But where I'm at right now, I absolutely love sushi. So yeah, avo and tuna sushi, to be honest. Nice. And bolognese. Bolognese is my specialty, but that would be what I love.
And the last one, if your life was either a song or a movie, what would it be?
Gosh.
And like, which one would it be?
Oh my gosh, I was not expecting this. What would it be?
I don't know. I must admit.
Probably some, I don't know why this is the first thing that came to mind and probably wouldn't be my answer, but like a Taylor Swift song. I don't know why.
You're a Taylor Swift fan?
I'm not at all, but I think some of her songs and her lyrics kind of like sum up my life sometimes. And to be honest, I've never been a big Taylor Swift girl, but ever since the concerts and her dating this, I don't know, footy player. So that it just literally was the first thing that came, but I can't give you an exact name or anything like that. That's the best I've got.
That was pretty good.
Oh, that's funny.
Now for the easier questions.
Yeah, I'm going to regret all my answers to that.
No, we'll dive straight into father complex and what it is. So just so we're all on the same page when we're talking about father complex, can you please share what exactly is it and how does it manifest in the lives of women?
Okay, so father complex, commonly known as daddy issues, a term that I don't like to use and I do want to navigate out of that. However, it's the easiest way to communicate with people. So father complex is when you have a complex relationship with your father, so it is in the title there, whether that be verbal abuse, physical abuse, absent of your father, whether that has been, you never met your father or your father passed away. Your father might hold really high expectations. So it can really vary as well. It can be from quite severe to quite minimal, but it can still have an impact on the relationship with your father and yourself. And then therefore it shows up in lots of different ways, whether it is having abandonment issues, whether it's having low self-esteem, whether it's fearing always, like losing someone, abandonment issues, as well as sabotaging relationships, not having self-belief. So there is a lot of different ways that it can show up in your everyday being and in relationships, but typically known as father complex, aka daddy issues, is having a complex, difficult relationship with your father. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely does. And it seems like there's a big range. Like it can be from like high sort of acute and or chronic sort of like abusive situations right down to just not knowing who your father is. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And there's all little different things in between. It just really depends on how far you want to dive into it and if it's something that you feel like it does affect your everyday life.
Yeah. So how did you get into this field of work and what's your background story with father complex issues?
Good question. I'm like, where do I start? I've had a really complex relationship with my father from the age of 3. So it's been a very up and down, hot and cold, I guess, emotional roller coaster of a relationship my whole entire life. And I think about it'd be 5 years ago, I got into studying health and science. And then I went into the coaching world. And then I found that coaching, I really loved being able to support and help people. But I found with all the clients that were coming through, they typically had some form of daddy issues. So then I started to do a lot of research, I trying to identify it a little bit more, as well as I knew this was something that I was moving through. So I wasn't sure if I was just attracting those kind of clients. So then I started to dive into it. And then I said to my partner, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is what really fulfills me. And I wish that I had that person in my life during the really tough scenarios, which I had about 4 pivotal scenarios in my life with my father, that I wish that, like, my mum was always there to support me, but I didn't really have the right tools on like how to communicate, how to set boundaries with someone that was really childish. And like, essentially he's my father, like he should be fathering me, but I had to step in and be the adult. And at 5 and 12 years old, you don't really know how to do that. So, and then it was just something, as I grew up, I constantly was the adult in the relationship until I got to the point and learned how to set strong boundaries and communicate to him. And I guess learn how to love myself again, because I had a very different view on my self-worth because of the relationship I had with my father. So I think as soon as I started doing that work for myself, that's when it really started to flow naturally going into father complex coaching. So yeah.
And what I find really interesting is like a lot of the time we can either rebel against or role model from our parents, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you had quite 2 different role models. You had your mother who was supportive and your father who was not supportive. Is that correct?
Yeah, mum was super supportive, never spoke poorly or ill of dad, was just always like, do what feels right, but tried to stay out of it. And dad was just a whole nother level.
And do you have siblings? Like, did they have the same sort of relationship with your father?
It's just me. So it was mum, myself, and dad. So that also puts a different kind of tone on the relationship to it too, being the only child.
Yeah, definitely. And so how does one's father complex issues affect relationships moving forward, whether they're romantic or otherwise, like in your own experience and in your experience as a professional in this field? How do you see this affecting our relationships?
A big one for me, and one that I I saw within myself as I was growing up is I had a tendency to sabotage every relationship that I was in, whether things would get really difficult in the relationship where there was even just a bit of conflict, and I would instantly go to the phrase, "Well, just break up with me." And it was very from like the age, I think I got my first boyfriend when I was 16, and every single relationship until the one that I have now, it was always like I would push them away when they would see, I guess, traits within me that could be improved, or if I felt like I wasn't showing up good enough in the relationship, or it was something I had to work on, I would just kind of push them away and sabotage the relationship rather than actually working through it and coming to terms with, hey, like I can, just because he's mentioned something doesn't mean he wants to leave me. So I always had the fear of abandonment, and because dad was so in and out of my life and would come and go as he pleases, and within that, the time that he would see me, there was always like verbal abuse, or not good enough at this, you don't call me enough, or why are you doing this, and why are you this? Like it was constantly a negative approach when he would talk to me. So I feel strongly, and so many clients that come through, they always say they have a tendency to sabotage the relationship, even though they love their partner so much, but the feeling becomes so overwhelming that they're like, well, if they're going to leave me, it needs to be on my terms. I need to be the one to say, you can go. But there can be lots of things like self-worth, like for me as well, how I saw myself, not good enough. Why does my father not want to make effort with me? Why doesn't he put in the work? Why is it up to me? That comes into relationships as well. And to be honest, I feel like women start to attract, if they don't work on the issues that are arising, they start to attract exactly their father figure. So they might, because we attract what we know, right? So if they are verbally abusive or even physically abusive, which is horrible, but you tend to then attract what you know, and that's what you think you're worthy of, because that's where your father is at. And yeah, I guess for me, I did that as well. Like I started to attract exactly my father figure, and it wouldn't show in the first like year. You'd be like, oh, love bomb, like this is amazing. And that's exactly what my father did to my mum, essentially is how she would describe it. Like she didn't see any traits. It was probably until they had me, she started to see his real self come out. So that would probably, hopefully that answers your question in a roundabout way. But
absolutely. And I think also just on that, it's again, if you experience this from such a young age, it's all you know, like that was all that was modeled to you. So you may feel that that's the norm of a relationship. So when your partner then goes and displays some of those qualities that your father did, you're just like, oh, well, this is men, like this is relationship. So exactly. And I guess that also brings to the forefront of like, when did you realize that it's not all men are like that? Because I can see how if that's the experience of your male role models, you would feel like, oh, this is just what guys are like, typical guys. But how did you learn that that's not what all men are like? And did you have other male role models in your life that were more positive?
To be completely honest, like I've been with my partner for 2 years now, and it probably wasn't up until the period of where I had done a lot of work on myself and work on moving through the complexity before getting into a relationship. So 2 years before meeting him, I started to attract really fun, like energetic, happy, easygoing, not relationships, but like getting to know people. And then that's when I guess called in my partner, and we met, and we've been together for 2 years, and it's been absolutely amazing. And he is, safe to say, nothing like my father. So in the last like 4 years, I've really started to, once I did the work, really, I think it just opened up a whole nother world for me, and I saw things in such a different light. And then I started attracting what was meant for me, essentially, because I did definitely feel like I held myself back from, you kind of go into the phase like, oh, all men are so bad. Like, I can't, like, what's the point in even being in a relationship? Like, it's too hard basket. But essentially, I had to do the work to find the right one. And I definitely had some amazing role models in my life. Like my grandfather was essentially my father. So he helped with like all things like schooling, paid for my school fees. Same with my uncles. Like they were a huge support for my mum because she was also a single mum and no partner throughout her, like she still to this day hasn't had a partner. So she's chosen just to be by herself because of, she does say because of how bad the relationship was. She's like, I'm happy by myself, but that's her journey and I kind of leave her there and be a support where I can. And yeah, so my grandfather and my uncle were always very, very supportive, and a big support for mum. So I'm so blessed that I had those role models at least in my life to kind of guide me in the right direction.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you did have some really positive male role models, because there are a lot of men out there that are just such beautiful souls, so kind and caring and giving. My husband being one of them, I'm very, very blessed. And my children are male as well, but I have definitely encountered a lot of men in the past who have not shown such empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
So I understand. I can definitely understand what some people can see in a lot of men. So can I just also ask, does it affect in any way your relationships with women, or that hasn't played into it for you, or does it for your clients? Like, has there been relations around women?
Yeah, reflecting on myself, yes. The clients that I have come through are really based on working through the relationship that they have with their current partner and learning how to, I guess, move through father complex with their father. So that hasn't popped up a lot. However, it definitely can in friendships as well, because when you get close, I know when I get close to someone, especially friends as well, like it is always in the back of my head, like, you know, what if I do something wrong and then they don't want to be friends with me, and I've opened up to them about all of these things. So that's definitely something when I was younger, I did find it really hard to be myself around people, especially growing up in school, just because I always feared like losing people that I loved and I guess formed a connection with. So I would probably say I sabotaged that in some sort of sense, but not a lot that has come through with clients have I heard that exact situation. But for myself, I have noticed a little bit with friends that I'll always be like, do I like dive in? Like, how close do I want to get with them? Will they be able to show up for me? But at the end of the day, it's come back to like, can I show up for myself? You know, as long as I'm there for myself and I listen to what I need and I be authentically myself, then
that makes a lot of sense. And I think also perhaps, and I don't know because I'm not speaking from experience, I'm also a heterosexual woman, as are you. You have a male partner, but I'm assuming perhaps in same-sex relationships, these sort of issues come up as well, if that one of the women has had father complex issues. And we're saying women is because you work with women, you don't work with men who have had father complex issues.
Exactly. I would 100% agree with you. I feel like father complex 100% can show up in any aspect, whether it is just a relationship with your partner, whether they're female or male, and then friends, partner, another family member, anything like that. At the end of the day, it's something that we're moving through, and it can show up in all different relationships. I would 100% agree.
So what are some indicators or signs that someone may be struggling with father complex? I mean, there's going to be some listeners that are like, hang on a minute, like maybe that's what's going on with me. Like I've had a relationship with my dad. I haven't even pieced it all together. And now I'm having, you know, these issues in my relationship. I don't want to show up for it. I'm scared of losing people, abandonment, all the things. So what are some of those common signs and indicators where you're like, I might be able to help you?
Yeah, a few big standouts that I feel like a lot of people could probably kind of get the idea from is women that typically have father complex attract an older man because it's more like their father. So they always want someone with a little bit more maturity that's going to, I guess, like love them and hold them and like, it sounds weird, but like father them, like subconsciously, like they want that male masculine energy to kind of take charge. And sometimes it can be polar opposite. Like, you know, the father complex can just range from so many different angles. But from what I've experienced with clients coming through, it would be attracting a lot like an older man, and then also some people crave a lot of intimacy, so being really close to someone, whether it is with one man or if it is with several different partners. And this is something that I've noticed with girls that do come through and work with me, is that they either crave a lot of physical touch, physical connection, and being close to their partner, or just lots of different people. So that is a big standout for people moving through father complex, as well as really low self-esteem. So not really understanding their worth, because depending on the relationship with your father, if it's like, you're not good enough, you don't show up for me, you don't try hard enough, if that's constantly in your ear for a majority of your life, you start to live and breathe that if you don't have a strong enough mindset. So that would be another big one. So they're like probably the three big standouts. And like I said, I've said like throughout this whole podcast, is self-sabotaging relationships, aggression, like anger towards men as well when you get into relationships. So unresolved emotions and not being able to regulate emotions can come up in really heated conversations within the relationship with whoever it may be, because that could be reflecting back from not being heard from your father, or suppressing a lot of emotion. And something that I speak to the girls about that come through is it's almost like an iceberg. So it's like sitting underneath the water, but everything like piles up until eventually it just explodes, because there's a lot that's been suffocated. So I would definitely say anger and not being able to regulate emotions, because there's so much that hasn't been addressed and needs to be worked through, whether it's releasing it through. There's so many different ways that you can release the emotion that I believe stores somewhere in the body, whether it's in your back, in your tummy, in your throat. Like there's so many different parts of the body that I feel that you'll be holding that emotion if you haven't been able to heal. So they would be the standout ones for me.
So in Ayurveda, we talk about having emotional armor, which is emotional toxins. So very much as physical toxins, but these are the emotional toxins that we hold in our body, and they actually produce like a real chemical response and hormonal response in our body. And then sometimes, like, you know, when you're really stressed and you get like these knots in your necks or shoulders, or some people feel it in your hip, like that's all emotional armor. It's you won't punched you in the neck or the hip, right? It's just build up of like tension and unresolved issues or things.
100. I was going to say you'd know all about that, all about emotional storage in the body. So yeah, definitely 100% agree with that.
So how do you address some of those underlying issues stemming from father absence or father neglect, or some of those unhealthy dynamics? Like what are some of the practical tools or strategies that you guide your clients through? Because I'm assuming there's going to be so many different underlying issues stemming from father complex. Because we all have a unique story, but I'm guessing a lot of them, you know, that absence, neglect, things that you've spoken about. How are you helping your clients through the process?
100. Yeah. So with helping clients, I work with a 10-week and a 5-week program. So for me, it's not something that you just come in for one session, you're like, oh, I'm healed, or I'll continue to do the work by myself. So this is something that requires people to be committed to make change. And within the 5 or 10-week program, we work on boundary setting, how to communicate, how to love yourself again. We do a lot of, like, of course, you share your story, we get to talk, release emotion and all of that stuff. But rather than just going to a therapist and talking everything and getting a little bit back, I do more so activities. So when I say activities, we'll be doing a lot of journaling, a lot of writing. There'll be certain tasks that will help you move through the complexity, or rewriting how you see yourself, or manifesting. Like we do a lot of different activities within the sessions to help you move through father complex, rather than also for me, it's like, yes, I want to hear your story and I want to hear how you feel it has affected you. But once I've heard that story, I want to focus on healing and kind of leaving that and accepting it and being okay with, okay, this has happened, but for my future now, this is what I'm going to do to create a better life for myself, for my future family, and for my future kids. So we do a lot of activities, self-love activities. I do a lot of inner child healing as well, so meditation and breath work to help people release some of that emotion. I also help clients, I'll guide them in the right direction to see particular practitioners. So if I feel like they need to do a little bit more shifting in certain different areas, I'll send them to someone else. I kind of give them almost like a life coach as well, like guidance and steps on how to heal properly, because I believe, sometimes it does take a beautiful tribe to heal and have the right people in your life to do that. So that's how we do some of those things.
100% agree. And drawing from your own clients or your own personal story, could you share an example of transformation? I mean, we've heard your transformation, which is beautiful and amazing, but any sort of transformational healing that you've witnessed in your clients going through the process, like just so we get like this visual. It's always nice to have a visual of what it looks like.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. I would definitely say with a lot of my clients, they'll come through and they'll be in like a bit of it, like a very negative mindset and like, and to be honest, a poor me mentality. Like, this has happened to me and I don't know what to do and it's not my fault and I just want to let it go. And it's quite toxic sometimes, and we kind of peel it back and we understand where it comes from. And then it is so amazing, like each session, especially in the 10-week framework, everyone just becomes so much lighter. And I think what it is helping people see things through a different lens. So they see it from, they've been in their minds for however long and they see it in a particular way. And until they have that perspective change, everything essentially is lifted. And I've seen things like people, like, I know this sounds horrible, but end relationships in the cycle of my framework because it is a relationship that isn't aligned to them, and they've been called to do some work because the relationship isn't serving them, and then they've found the inner power to say, hey, I am worthy of more. So I have seen that a few times, and it's not something that I'm going to be like, okay, well, this relationship needs to end, it's unhealthy, it's like your father. It just naturally evolved into that because they saw things from a different lens. And a lot more independence, a lot more confidence. And within that, people start to do things that are truly, that lights them up, fills their cup up, they're excited to do. And I just honestly, just a natural glow and energy shift completely. It's really hard to explain, but if you're there, you'd understand.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I see it with my clients all the time as well. And I think the energy shift is such a big thing because for a lot of women, even women who might not suffer from father complex issues, boundaries is so huge. Women, a lot of women I know, a lot of women I work with just don't have boundaries, or they're people pleasers. They want to make people time, and a lot of their worth is riding on that. And so once they can start implementing boundaries and feel really good about that because they've also shifted their perspective, as you mentioned, on their own self-worth, I find there being a massive energy shift because boundaries weigh you down, mostly it just weighs you down. It's all like that down vibration, whereas when you can lift that, you're going to feel lighter, you're going to feel more energized, you're going to be wanting to do things that bring you more passion and joy. It's like moving from what we say in Ayurveda, from that tamasic state into more of a rajasic and sattvic energy, which is that lightness, that purity, and that confidence and beautiful glow. So I totally understand what you're saying about that transformation. It's really sort of like this energetic transformation, and it's a whole life transformation. It sounds very airy fairy woo woo when you say it like I've seen it. I understand exactly.
Okay, thank you. That was a perfect sum up for what I was trying to say. And I think that's why I said it's hard to explain, because a lot of people are like, oh, airy fairy, like, what do you mean she had a special glow? And I'm like, you just have to be there to experience it and you'll know. And like you said, the whole boundary setting is a huge one. And that's why I make it a big part of the framework that I do, is communication and boundary setting, because when you have those set in stone and you're grounded within that, it changes so many different things. So I agree with you there.
And I've got a couple of more questions just to wrap it up, but I really wanted to ask if there are any misconceptions or myths about father complex that you wish to dispel.
Yes.
Good.
I don't know. For me, and I think this is what like pushed me into this direction, is whenever I was growing up, how do I say this? Is a lot of people would be like, oh, in such a toxic term, is you've got daddy issues, like you've got so many things wrong with you, like you attract old men and you've got so many people that, you know, that you're talking to, and it's all because of your father. Like there was a lot of things that were happening in my life. People would be like, oh, it's because you've got daddy issues. And I think it's like ingrained in me to change that term, because it's really, in my eyes, I find it really rude and I guess not empathetic at all. It's like, well, yeah, I am actually moving through something that's really challenging for me. My father wasn't around and he was abusive, but yet here you're making fun of me. So yeah.
Negative connotations of it onto you. Like, why does that happen with a lot of things regarding like women's health and women's mental health? It's like, oh, you know, this negative thing is about you. It's like, well, I'm the one that has to move through it. Yeah. Not, you know.
But yeah, like, hold up, like, give me some space here. Like, I'm digesting it. But that's probably what I want to move through, is like, I want to help people understand is it is something that women move through, and it's really challenging. And to be honest, the people that would say it would come from men. So I think that's what really, and to be fair, a few of my friends said it in high school as well. And then even like throughout my life, there's been some things is, oh, that's probably because you've got daddy issues. But that door kind of closes. And I almost have started this conversation. Yeah, do you want to talk about it? I can tell you all about it, because it is actually a thing and it has affected me. So kind of like, instead of just closing that door and saying, oh yeah, it's daddy issues, and using it in quite a toxic, and like labeling it quite in a toxic, I guess, way, yeah, like opening the door and say like, yeah, let's talk about it. It's been really hard for me. How's your relationship with your father? You know, do you feel like, you know, just having a different approach if you feel like someone is moving through it, or they're expressing something to you that, you know, they're going through with their father at the moment, like just don't use the term daddy issues. Like I use it as a bit of to make people understand what I'm helping people move through. And it is, people are like, oh, daddy issues, like I know all about that. And then I tell them and they're like, oh, okay, please explain. So that's probably what I'm trying to help change, is that phrase.
And I think you're really, really courageous and brave speaking about it, because like I said, I haven't had anyone on the podcast speaking on this topic. I don't think I've even really met anyone that worked in this space until I met you. So I think it's amazing what you're doing, and so helpful, changing the narrative and being an advocate for all of the women who do have father complex issues. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and just being an advocate for all of the women out there. And the last question I would love to ask you is, do you have any advice for our listeners who may be struggling with father complex issues now that they're aware of it, but they're not sure where to begin their healing journey? Like, what would you say the first step would be for those ladies?
Definitely. So a big one for me is journal. So if you feel like you're like, oh, like the relationship with my father has been a bit interesting, you could, one step or tool that I like to tell people is write down how you feel when you're in the presence of your father, or when you leave your father. How do you leave feeling? Are you kind of, it's any relationship really. Are you stressed? Do you feel fulfilled? Or you kind of like, oh, that was a lot. And so, yeah, reflection and being aware is the first step. And then definitely reach out to someone, whether it is someone that it's a friend, but make sure it's a well-trusted friend that you know it stays between the both of you. And then secondly, reach out to myself or a therapist if you feel like that's more the road that you want to go down. And then with myself, if you are listening to this podcast and you're like, oh, I'm unsure, I feel like I do want to speak about it, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to invest in it, I do a free 30-minute contact call. So you can ask all things father complex. You can even share a little bit of your story, and we can kind of unpack a little to see whether or not we'd be a good fit to work together. So that would probably be my advice on some steps to take if you feel like you are moving through father complex.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And where can the listeners find you?
They can find me at, oh gosh, I'm like, what is my Instagram line? It's evolve on 2 underscores, but I'm sure I can probably send that to you if you want to pop it in the show notes. And then I've also got a father complex website as well, but I'll send that through to you. But Instagram is where I'm putting most of my, I guess, like information, and booking system is all on Instagram as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and shedding light on this topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me be able to do that and like share the awareness of father complex. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.